Before you begin this lesson, could you please pause and review your flashcards? There is no point moving forward if we're forgetting anything we've done previously. Right, once you've done that, then we're now on to questionnaires and interviews. We're going to look at open questions, closed questions, what a pilot study is, and bias. So questionnaires and interviews are a source of primary data, with a questionnaire being a set of questions that are used to obtain data from the population and sample. This can be carried out via post, email, phone, or face-to-face, and the person completing the questionnaire is called the respondent. Okay. Now, first thing to cover is open and closed questions. They're the two different types of questions on a questionnaire. Open questions where we have no suggested answers, and closed questions are where you have tick boxes or boxes of some sort, answers to choose from. First thing we need to cover then is how do we write a good question? Okay, so a question has to have lots of key things. So for example, I'm gonna show you some questions, and we're gonna produce a list of things that good questionnaires have to have. These are examples of bad questions. So how many brothers do you have? And the main issue here is in the response boxes. Okay, so when you're providing response boxes, then we have to make sure that the response boxes are not overlapping and exhaustive. Okay, so they have to be non-overlapping and exhaustive option boxes. So just looking at the example, if you had 3 brothers, you would be unsure which box you're putting them in. You could not just choose. Your data wouldn't be very accurate. And then also there's nothing for if you had more than 5 brothers. Okay, so that's the problem with that one. You do support the idea of school uniform, don't you? Now, this is called a leading question, okay? And we don't want leading questions because it's trying to make your respondent want to agree. You do support, okay? So it's kind of like guiding you towards a specific answer, okay? Avoid leading questions. Do you take drugs, right? This is what we would call a question that is offensive, personal, embarrassing. Okay, it's not one that someone's gonna answer honestly, potentially. And here's your list of things when we're looking at questionnaires. So keep questions short, use simple language, don't make it too confusing. Avoid biased or leading questions. Give intervals that do not overlap but that cover all different possibilities. Avoid questions that respondents are unlikely to answer honestly. Include a time frame or unit in the question. How often do you do homework? Not a good question, okay? How many times per week do you do homework? With option boxes that are non-overlapping and exhaustive, that's a good question. Questions should be relevant to the investigation. Don't go asking someone their age if you don't need to know their age for the investigation, if it's absolutely not relevant at all. Okay. Right, get the list written down, please. And that's what we need for a questionnaire. Now, there's problems with questionnaires though, okay? And problems that we need to kind of avoid. And these are the two main ones. The first one being non-response and the second one being a sensitive question. So non-response is simply when the people in the sample do not respond. This could be due to people not wanting to answer or not understanding the question, okay? So there's different things that you can do to try and encourage respondents. Offer incentives, for example. Incentive to encourage responding. For example, if you are dropping off a questionnaire around people's houses, okay, if you say, upon return of this complete questionnaire, I will give you a £5 gift voucher for something, right? It's an incentive. People are more likely going to do it. Or if you say, rather than post through a questionnaire and ask people to return it to you at an address that you're given, why don't you give them a stamped addressed envelope so that's taking that out of it for you? All they've got to do is put it in the envelope, pop it in a post box, or even better, go back and collect it. So there's different things that you can do to stop people, to encourage people to respond. Okay. Right, the other one is a sensitive question, and these include questions about age, health, weight, salary. These are all things that people don't often want to respond to, or whether they've done something illegal, for example. You know, it makes people feel uncomfortable, so they may not answer truthfully. And this can then distort the results. Okay, you can make respondents more comfortable by making the questionnaire anonymous and allowing them to answer the questionnaire in private, or by using the random response method. So 2 ways of overcome this, as I've just mentioned, is number 1, you can make respondents more comfortable by making the questionnaire anonymous. Or the second one is something called the random response method, and I'm about to go over that now. Okay, you need to be able to, for higher students, need to be comfortable with the random response method, and how we use it. Okay, right. Let's cover random response method then. So the random response method is a way to try and limit bias, a way to try and limit distortion when asking sensitive questions, because people may not answer truthfully, basically. So, for example, this question, have you ever shoplifted? You're going to flip a coin. If you answer heads, you have to say yes. If you get heads, you have to say yes. If you get tails, you answer truthfully. So just imagine this situation. You want to answer this correctly. Have you ever shoplifted? But you don't want to embarrass yourself by saying, yes, I've shoplifted, because then you're telling someone that you've shoplifted, and some people may not feel comfortable doing that. However, if you bring the coin element into it and someone can't see what you've landed on, if you've got a heads or a tail, if you get a heads, you have to say yes. Okay. But they don't know if you say yes, if you got a heads, or if you're answering truthfully. So it enables participants to answer yes without the embarrassment. It enables people to answer yes, whereas the person asking the questionnaire doesn't know if they've answered yes because they've got a heads or because they've shoplifted. Okay, and that's the idea around this. So we're going to do a little bit of maths now to answer one of those types of questions. Let me do an example first, and then we will do the exam question. So imagine 200 people are asked. So 200 people are asked to take part in this, and we end up with 120 yeses. Okay, and we have to calculate the proportion of people who have shoplifted. Okay, let's do this then. So out of the 200 people, they're flipping a coin, and we're going to be getting heads and tails. Now, it's never going to be exact, but we expect it to be in the ratio 50-50. So half the people to get heads, which would be 100, and half the people to get tails, which would be 100. If you get a heads, you have to say yes. So there's 100 yeses just from saying yes, just from getting the head, sorry. However, if you get a tails, you can choose what you want to say. Now, in total, they got 120 yeses. Now, 100 of those are from the people that had to say yes because they got a heads. These are the people that got a heads. That leaves us with 20 people who chose to answer yes. So basically got a tails and chose to answer yes. So what proportion of people have shoplifted? Those 20 people have shoplifted out of the 100 people who got the tails. You could leave it as 20 over 100 or 20%. It is not 20 over 200. We could got to discount those people. They had to say yes, okay? We're just interested in the people who could choose whether, who had to answer truthfully, could choose to say yes or no. So let's do a proper GCSE question based on this. A company wants to investigate the number of sick days its employees have off work. The company uses a questionnaire, and here is one of them. If you get a 1, 2, 3 or 4 tick box A, so this is a fair dice. You have to, if yes, so yes is A, let's just make this clear, and no is B. It's hard when they, it's like a double look, isn't it, that you have to kind of do both. So we'll write it like that. So 1, 2, 3 or 4, you have to say yes. Okay, 1, 2, 3 or 4. So that means 4/6 of people have to say yes. If you get a 5 or 6, so truth is 2/6 can say the truth. Right, number 1, assess the appropriateness of the method that the company has used. Is it an appropriate method? Well, why do we use this method? We use this method if we have a personal sensitive question to try and limit the people that would not answer correctly and cause distortion. So assess the appropriateness. You would answer yes, it's an appropriate method because it's a sensitive question. Okay, and that would be the best response for that. So appropriate method. As the question is sensitive. Okay, that's what I'd recommend there. Right. Next then, let's do the calculations with this. All the company's employees completed the question. 615 ticked box A, 102 ticked box B. First of all, let's work out how many people there were altogether who did the questionnaire. Now, GCSE statistics is a calculator exam. You don't need to do anything non-calculator, so just feel free to get your calculator out. But it's 717 people took part, so 717 participants, we could say. Now, from those calculations I put in at the beginning, we can see that, so I'm just going to scroll up, 4/6 had to say yes. 4/6 had to tick box A. 4/6 had to tick box A to say yes. On average, because they rolled a 1, 2, 3 or 4 on the dice. So let's do 4/6 of 770. On my calculator, I'm just going to do 4/6 multiplied by 717, giving us an answer of 478 had to say yes because they rolled, or tick box A, because they rolled a 1, 2, 3 or 4. Okay, so that's 478, but we had 615 tick box A. So the rest of the people then we can assume chose to. If we do 615, subtract 478, 615 had to pick box A. Sorry, ticked box A. 478 had to tick box A, leaving 137. So the people that chose to answer yes was 137. Now, there may be a point here where it might say to you, what is the proportion of people that did shoplift? And it would be 137 out of the population that rolled a 4 or a 5. So 478 people was the 1, 2, 3 or 4. So we could work out how many people were the 4 or 5 by doing 717 subtract 478, or 2. It's 239, okay? The question didn't ask for that. The question asked for that. But I'm just saying in some instances you have to do that. Okay, the last part then of this lesson is about interviews. Interviews are where you question each person individually, okay? Involves lots of specific questions or a list of topics and can be carried out face-to-face over the phone or the internet. And we're just going to go through the benefits of a interview and disadvantages, and then the same for questionnaires. So if you, in an interview, the interviewer can explain the questions, okay, which can be useful. I just write cues, which can be useful if you don't understand the questions. Respondents can explain their answer. Basically, there's more detail. And finally, a higher response rate. And the reason it's got a higher response rate usually is because if you're interviewing, you're directly in front of the person. Okay, you can probe for further answers. You can't ignore someone stood in front of you. Disadvantages: less likely to answer personal questions. Time consuming. And with everything that's time consuming, it's expensive to do, okay? Respondent may try to impress or guess the answer. Interview bias. Interview may interpret answers to suit their opinion. There are other ones, but they're three of the main ones. Right, and a questionnaire then. If it's anonymous, let's just cover an anonymous one. So they're more likely to answer personal questions. Quicker, and therefore it's cheaper. Easier to send questionnaires to a large sample size. However, some questions may not be understood. Researchers may not understand some of the responses. And a lower response rate. Easier to be ignored, isn't it? Right, there you go. That's all the information on questionnaires and interviews.